Silura, the daughter of Lord Seller, sat in the cold, high throne room, staring out at the dark stars beyond the window. Her father's kingdom stretched across galaxies, but she had never been able to live up to his expectations. She wasn't a great warrior like her brothers, nor a powerful diplomat like her father. Her skills were small, insignificant in the eyes of the alien court. Useless, Lord Sailor had called her many times, his voice cold and angry. She had tried everything to please him, learning combat skills, studying politics, even mastering the art of war. But nothing worked. Her father had been disappointed by her time and time again. Now, Lord Sailor had made a decision. He had found a way to rid himself of what he saw as his greatest failure. And it was not by banishing her or by locking her away in a distant part of the galaxy. No, this time, he would do something far worse. He was giving her away to a human. Captain Jared Stevens was a human diplomat known for his ability to negotiate peace between worlds. He was the perfect choice, according to Lord Sailor. He would take Silura, not as an honored guest, but as a burden, a prize that no one wanted. Her father hoped that sending her to a lowly human would show his power, show that he could dispose of even his own daughter without a second thought. Silura had heard the news in silence. She wasn't surprised. She was used to being ignored and forgotten. What did it matter if she was sent away? Perhaps this was the fate she deserved. The day of departure came quickly. Silura packed nothing, her heart already heavy with the weight of the alien world's disappointment. As she walked to the spaceship that would carry her away, she couldn't help but feel a mixture of sadness and relief. There was no fight left in her. She had long ago given up hope of proving herself. When Captain Jared arrived, she barely glanced at him. He was a tall, strong-looking man with an aura of confidence. Yet there was something about him that made Silura feel a strange, unfamiliar hope stir within her chest. He didn't look at her with disgust, nor did he show any sign of pity. He just observed her, as if waiting for something. "You are the gift, then?" Jared asked quietly. Silura nodded, unsure of what to say. "I am." Jared was silent for a moment, his eyes studying her. There was no hate in his gaze, only curiosity. But in that moment, Silura couldn't believe it mattered. What did it matter if he was kind or not? She was just a disappointment after all. The journey to Earth was long and filled with silence. The spaceship was quiet except for the soft hum of the engines, and Silura spent most of the time looking out the window, watching the stars pass by. She didn't mind the silence. She had grown used to being alone, to feeling like she didn't belong anywhere. It was better than facing her father's disappointment or the whispers of the alien court. Captain Jared didn't seem to mind it either. He spent most of his time working, reading reports, or staring out at the stars just like her. But sometimes, when their eyes met, there was a moment of connection. It was strange, almost comforting. She didn't expect him to care, but somehow his presence felt different from the coldness she had known her entire life. One afternoon, when they were nearing Earth's orbit, Jared sat down across from her, breaking the silence. "You don't talk much, do you?" he asked, his voice gentle but curious. Silura glanced up at him, unsure how to respond. She hadn't spoken much since she left her home, not because she was shy, but because she didn't know what to say. She was a disappointment after all. What was there to talk about? "I don't have much to say," she replied softly, her voice almost lost in the hum of the ship. "I'm just here." Jared didn't respond immediately, and for a moment, Silura thought he would just let the conversation die. But instead, he leaned forward slightly, his eyes locking with hers. "You know, your father doesn't know you, Silura," he said quietly. "He doesn't see who you really are." Silura blinked, surprised by his words. "He knows me better than anyone," she said, almost defensively. "He's my father." Jared shook his head slowly. "No, he only sees what he wants to see. He sees power, strength, and success. But he doesn't see you. Not really." Silura felt a tightness in her chest, something unfamiliar. She had always believed that her father's view of her was the only one that mattered. But Jared's words stirred something deep inside her, a small spark of hope she hadn't felt in years. She wanted to believe him, but it was hard. "Why do you care?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jared smiled, a small warm smile. "Because I believe there's more to you than you think." For the first time in what felt like forever, Salura felt her heart race, not from fear, but from something else. Was it hope? It was too soon to tell, but she couldn't ignore the strange feeling that Jared's words had awakened inside her. As the days passed, Salura began to feel something shift within her. Jared's kindness, his belief in her, was like a breath of fresh air. She wasn't sure if she could trust it yet, but for the first time, she felt like maybe she wasn't as useless as her father had always told her. The ship finally entered Earth's atmosphere, and Salura braced herself for the unknown. A new world, a new life, and maybe, just maybe, a new beginning. Earth was everything Salura had imagined and more. The skies were wide and blue, the cities bustling with people, and the air smelled like freedom. It was nothing like her cold, distant homeworld. But there was something else she had noticed, something she wasn't ready to admit. Even here, on a planet so far from her father's reach, she still felt out of place. Captain Jared had kept his promise. He didn't treat her like a prisoner, but he also didn't push her to open up. He respected her space, and that was something Salura wasn't used to. Her father had always expected perfection, and the court had never given her the chance to breathe. But Jared, he simply listened, and that made all the difference. One evening, after a long day of exploring the city, Jared invited her to dinner. They sat together at a small restaurant, the windows showing a beautiful sunset over the horizon. Jared asked about her home world, about her life before she was sent away. Salura hesitated, unsure of how much to share, but something about the way Jared looked at her, with no judgment, made her want to open up. "I wasn't always like this," she said quietly, her fingers tracing the rim of her glass. "My father, he wanted me to be strong, to be like my brothers, but I couldn't. I couldn't fight like them. I couldn't lead like them." Her voice cracked a little as she spoke, and she quickly looked away, not wanting Jared to see the vulnerability she had kept hidden for so long. Jared watched her closely but didn't interrupt. He simply nodded, encouraging her to continue. "The truth is, I have a power," Salura continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "A power I've been hiding from everyone, even my father. It's not a power of strength, or magic, or anything like that. It's something else. I don't even know how to explain it." Jared's curiosity grew. "What kind of power?" he asked, his tone gentle but filled with interest. Salura took a deep breath before answering. "It's a power that can change things. It can shape minds, or bend the will of others. But it's dangerous. If I lose control, I could destroy everything around me." Her words hung heavy in the air between them, but Jared's expression didn't change. "That sounds like a lot of pressure," he said thoughtfully. "But if anyone can control it, I believe it's you, Salura." For the first time, Salura looked up and met his gaze. She could see the sincerity in his eyes, and it made something inside her stir, a feeling she hadn't allowed herself to have for years. "Hope. I've never let anyone see it," she confessed. "Not even my father. I was afraid of what it could do. Afraid of what I could do." Jared smiled, his voice full of reassurance. "It's okay to be afraid, but you don't have to hide it anymore. I believe you can control it, Salura. I believe you can be more than your father ever thought." Salura felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. For the first time in her life, someone believed in her, truly believed in her. Not as a royal daughter, not as a failure, but as someone with her own strength. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time, she felt ready to face it. The city of New York was alive with the buzz of everyday life. Salura had spent the last few weeks getting used to the noise, the lights, and the bustling streets. It was strange, yet exciting, to see so many people from all walks of life living together. For the first time, she began to feel like maybe Earth wasn't as foreign to her as she had once thought. Captain Jared and Salura had become close friends, and Jared had taken it upon himself to show her around Earth, teaching her about human culture. They shared stories, laughter, and small moments of silence that felt comfortable. But deep down, Salura couldn't forget why she was here. She was a prisoner, a gift to Jared, nothing more than a royal burden. Then came the day that changed everything. It started with a sudden alarm, one that echoed through the city. The calm, peaceful atmosphere of Earth was shattered by the sound of rushing footsteps and frantic voices. Salura froze, her heart pounding in her chest. Jared's expression turned serious as he grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the exit. "Stay close," he said, his voice low but urgent. "We need to get to safety." Before she could ask what was happening, they emerged onto the busy streets. People were running in every direction, panic setting in as they looked up at the sky. A fleet of alien ships hovered above the city, their dark forms blocking out the sun. They were not here for peace. Salura's heart sank as she recognized the markings on the ships. "They're from my world," she said, her voice shaking. "It's my father's soldiers." Jared's eyes widened with concern. "What do they want?" "They're here for me," she answered, her voice barely a whisper. "They want to take me back." Before Jared could respond, one of the ships descended rapidly toward them, landing in the middle of the street. The door opened with a hiss, and out stepped a group of soldiers, their weapons raised. They were followed by a familiar face, one that sent a chill down Salura's spine. Her older brother, Commander Salur, stood at the front, his eyes cold and calculating. "Salura," he said, his voice filled with disdain. "It's time to return home. Father wants you back." Jared stepped forward, standing protectively in front of Salura. "I'm not letting you take her," he said firmly. "She's not going anywhere with you." The soldiers aimed their weapons at him, but Salura stepped forward, her heart racing. She knew what she had to do. She could no longer hide from the power her father had feared. "I'm not going back," she declared, her voice strong despite the fear that gripped her. "I choose my own path." Jared looked at her in shock, but Salura's gaze never wavered from her brother. She reached deep within herself, feeling the surge of power that had always been there, waiting. With a single thought, she directed it outward, her hands glowing with energy. The soldiers hesitated, confusion flashing in their eyes. Salura raised her hands, and with a surge of pure will, she created a powerful shield around them, knocking the soldiers back. The ground shook, and the soldiers stumbled, their weapons falling from their hands. Jared stared at her in awe, his mouth slightly open. What was that?" Salura turned to him, breathing heavily. "That was the power I've been hiding. I can control it, but it's not easy." Her brother's eyes narrowed as he regained his footing. "You can't escape, Salura. Father will not be pleased." "I don't care about what Father thinks anymore," she said, her voice steady. "I'm done being his disappointment." The battle was far from over, but for the first time, Salura felt something she had never felt before, a sense of control over her own destiny. The days following the battle were a blur. Salura and Jared had retreated to a safe location, far from the chaos that the alien soldiers had caused. Her brother, Commander Salur, had taken his forces and retreated for the moment, but it was clear that the fight was far from over. Salura sat quietly in the small room they had taken refuge in, her thoughts racing. The power she had unleashed felt both exhilarating and terrifying. For years, she had hidden it from everyone, including herself. She had been afraid of what it could do, afraid of losing control. But in that moment, when she had seen Jared's protectiveness and the threat her father's soldiers posed, something inside her had snapped. She couldn't hide anymore. Jared entered the room, his face serious but not unkind. "We need to talk," he said, sitting down beside her. Salura looked up at him, her heart heavy with uncertainty. I can't do this, Jared. I'm not ready to face all of this. I'm not ready to fight. Jared didn't immediately respond. He studied her for a moment, his eyes soft but unwavering. You don't have to do it alone, Selura. You don't have to be perfect. You just need to believe in yourself. Selura shook her head, frustration building. How can I believe in myself when all I've ever known is failure? My father, he always told me I wasn't strong enough. I wasn't capable. And now I've revealed something I don't understand, something that could hurt people. Jared placed a hand on her shoulder. I've seen the way you care, the way you want to protect others. That's the strength you have, Selura. It's not about being perfect or powerful like your father wanted. It's about using what you have to protect those you care about. Her eyes met his, and for the first time, Selura didn't feel like a disappointment. She felt understood. Jared wasn't looking at her like a weapon, or as the useless daughter of an alien lord. He saw her as a person with potential. And that realization stirred something deep inside her. What if I can't control it? She asked quietly. What if I hurt someone? Jared gave a small smile, one filled with trust. You won't. You just need to learn how to focus, how to direct that power. I'll help you. You're not alone in this, Selura. Selura's breath caught in her throat. She didn't know why, but she felt a warmth inside her chest. Maybe, just maybe, Jared was right. Maybe she wasn't as powerless as she had always thought. The fear that had once controlled her began to feel smaller, more distant. She wasn't sure how it would all play out, but she was starting to believe that she could face whatever came next. I don't know if I'm ready for this, she whispered. Jared's expression softened. You don't have to be ready. You just have to try. Selura looked out the window, her mind racing with the possibilities. She could feel the power inside her, pulsing gently, waiting. It was a part of her, and now she was ready to face it head-on. No more hiding. No more running. She turned back to Jared, her voice firm for the first time in a long while. I'm ready. The peaceful life that Selura and Jared had started to build was abruptly interrupted. A chill swept over the world as news broke out. Lord Sailor, Selura's father, had arrived on Earth. His fleet of ships filled the sky, blocking out the sun. His soldiers were everywhere, marching through the streets, ready for whatever came next. Selura stood by the window, staring at the ships in the distance. She could feel the weight of her father's presence, even though he hadn't stepped foot on the planet yet. His power was overwhelming, his reputation known across galaxies. She had once feared him, feared his anger, and his disapproval. But now, standing beside Jared, she felt a different kind of fear. Fear of losing herself to the past, of being dragged back into a life she had tried to escape. Jared entered the room, his face grim. Selura, your father is demanding an audience. He's threatening to take Earth as part of his territory if you don't return with him. Selura's heart pounded. She had never imagined her father would be so bold, so ruthless. He won't listen, she said softly. He never listens. Jared stepped closer, his hand resting on her shoulder. Then we'll make him listen. Her eyes met his, and for the first time, she saw not just a human, but an ally, someone who truly believed in her. How? She asked, her voice filled with doubt. How can I stop him? You don't have to do it alone, Jared said firmly. We'll fight this together. You don't have to go back to him. Selura, you've already proven you have the power to stand up for yourself. Selura looked down at her hands. The same power she had once feared was now her only chance. It was her weapon, her shield. She wasn't the weak, useless daughter anymore. She had the strength to fight for her future. I can't run anymore, she whispered, more to herself than to Jared. I've spent my whole life hiding. It's time to stop. It's time to show him I'm not his failure. Jared nodded, his eyes filled with unwavering support. That's the spirit. Let's show him who you really are. Later that day, Selura and Jared stood at the front of a large meeting room, facing a screen showing Lord Sailor's face. The alien lord's expression was cold. His eyes narrowed as he spoke. "Celery, you have 3 choices," he said, his voice icy and commanding. "Come back with me, and all will be forgiven. Refuse, and I will destroy everything you've come to care about." Celery's chest tightened, but she stood tall, her gaze never wavering from the screen. "I will not return to you, Father. I'm done being your disappointment. I have a life here, and I will protect it with everything I have." Jared stood beside her, his presence a strong, reassuring force. He wasn't just here for her. He was here with her. Lord Sailor's face twisted into a sneer. "You dare defy me. You are nothing without me, Celura." But Celura's voice was steady and strong as she answered, "I'm more than you ever thought I could be." The room fell silent, the tension thick as Lord Sailor's anger boiled beneath his cold exterior. But Celura wasn't afraid anymore. She had found her strength, and she wasn't going to let it slip away. The tension between Celura and her father was unbearable. Lord Sailor, powerful and feared, had come to claim her, to force her back into the life she had rejected. But Celura had made her choice. She was no longer the useless daughter. She was her own person, with her own future. The sound of marching soldiers filled the streets. Lord Sailor had brought an army, and the city was on high alert. Celura stood at the window of their safe house, looking out at the chaos below. The ground trembled with the weight of alien boots as Scowler's forces advanced. His ship still hovered above, darkening the sky like an ominous storm. Jared stood beside her, his expression resolute. "We need to act fast. The longer we wait, the more damage they'll do." Celura nodded, her mind racing. She had always been afraid of her father's power, but now, with Jared by her side, she realized something important. Fear could no longer control her. She had the strength to protect herself and those she cared about. She had the power to stand up to her father, not just with words, but with action. "We fight," Celura said, her voice steady. Jared raised an eyebrow. "You're sure?" Celura turned to him, determination in her eyes. "I'm sure. I've hidden long enough. It's time to take control of my life." Together, they moved quickly, gathering what they needed and heading toward the city's central square. Celura's heart raced with both fear and excitement. This was it, the moment that would define her. She wasn't just going to run or hide anymore. She was going to make her stand, and she was going to do it with everything she had. When they reached the square, Celura's brother, Commander Xaler, was already there, standing before the soldiers. He looked at Celura with cold eyes, a sneer playing on his lips. "You think you can stop me, Celura?" he called out, his voice carrying over the battlefield. "You're nothing. You always have been. Your power is nothing compared to mine." Celura took a deep breath, focusing on the power within her. It surged to the surface, growing stronger as she accepted it, as she embraced who she had become. "I'm not the weak daughter you remember, Xaler," she said, her voice loud and clear. "I'm not your failure." Jared stepped forward, standing beside her. "We'll fight together," he said, his voice filled with confidence. "You're not alone anymore." Celura turned to him, her heart swelling with gratitude. He had always believed in her, even when she hadn't believed in herself. Together, they were stronger than ever. The battle began in an instant. The soldiers charged, weapons raised, but Celura was ready. She unleashed her power, a wave of energy that sent shockwaves through the air. Her shield blocked the first wave of attacks, and she pushed forward, determined to protect the city and her new life. Xaler's forces hesitated for just a moment, shocked by the force of her power. That moment was all Celura needed. With a single motion, she sent a powerful burst of energy toward her brother, knocking him off his feet. The ground trembled, and the soldiers scattered, unsure of how to proceed. But Celura didn't stop. She moved forward, determined to finish what she had started. For the first time in her life, she was in control. And nothing, not even her father, could take that from her. The battle had raged on for hours, but now, As Silura stood in the middle of the ruined city square, the air was thick with silence. The last of her father's soldiers had fallen, and the remaining few had retreated. The street was littered with debris, the echoes of the conflict still hanging in the air. Silura could feel the weight of everything that had just happened, everything she had just done. Her father's ship loomed in the sky, casting a long shadow over the city. It was no longer a symbol of power. It now felt like a threat that was slowly losing its grip on her life. "Silura," Jared said, his voice soft but strong. "You did it. You stopped him." Silura turned to look at him, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Her hands trembled from the strain of using so much power, but inside, she felt something she had never felt before. Pride. For the first time, she was in control of her own fate. And she hadn't done it alone. "I couldn't have done it without you," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. She looked out over the battlefield, her mind racing. She had faced her father and won, but the cost of the battle was still too high. The doors to the massive ship opened, and there, standing at the entrance, was Lord Sailor. His cold, calculating gaze swept across the battlefield, taking in the sight of his fallen soldiers. His expression was one of fury, but there was also something else, a hint of disbelief. He had never expected Silura to defeat him, not like this. "You," he growled, his voice thick with anger. "You dare defy me. You are nothing without me. You always were." Silura stood tall, her heart steady despite the rage in her father's voice. "I was never nothing, father. You just couldn't see it. But now, you will." Sailor sneered, stepping forward. "You think you've won. You've only destroyed everything you were meant to be. You don't get to decide that anymore." Silura said firmly, "I'm not your failure, and I'm not your weapon. I am my own person." For a moment, there was silence between them. The wind howled through the ruined city, but there was no movement from either side. It was as if time itself had frozen, waiting for the next move. Sailor's gaze hardened. "You will regret this, Silura. No one defies me in lives to tell the tale." "You've already lost," Silura replied, her voice steady. "You may have been powerful, but your cruelty blinded you. I'm not the person I was when I left you. I'm stronger than you'll ever understand." With those words, Silura raised her hands, gathering her power. This time, she didn't hesitate. She sent a blast of energy toward her father's ship, the force of it so strong that it shook the ground beneath their feet. The ship shuddered as the blast hit, the massive craft spinning out of control. Silura focused, her heart racing with adrenaline, and with one final push, the ship exploded into a brilliant burst of light. The silence that followed was deafening. Lord Sailor stood there, his face a mask of disbelief. No. But it was over. The power that once controlled Silura, the fear that had held her captive for so long, had finally been shattered. And with it, her father's reign of terror. She turned to Jared, her heart filled with a sense of peace she had never known. "It's over." Jared smiled, his pride for her shining in his eyes. "You've done it, Silura. You've made your own future." Silura looked up at the sky, the first time in her life truly free. She had overcome the darkness of her past, and now she could finally step into the light of her own destiny. The city was quiet now. The sounds of battle had faded, and all that remained were the signs of destruction. Burned buildings, broken streets, and the lingering smoke in the air. But amid all the chaos, there was a sense of peace. Silura stood at the edge of the square, looking out at the horizon. The sun was beginning to rise, casting a soft orange glow over the world. She felt something she had never felt before: hope. Jared stood beside her, his presence comforting. He had been with her every step of the way. And now, as she looked out over the city they had both fought to protect, she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't alone anymore. "I never thought it would end like this," Silura said, her voice quiet but filled with wonder. "I never thought I'd be free." "You've earned it," Jared replied, his voice filled with pride. "You fought for it. Celery, and now you have the chance to build something new. Celery turned to him, a soft smile on her face. Thank you, Jared, for everything. Jared smiled back. You didn't need my help, Celery. You were always strong. I just believed in you when you couldn't believe in yourself. Celery's heart swelled at his words. She had always doubted herself, but now, with Jared's unwavering support, she realized just how much she was capable of. She wasn't her father's daughter anymore. She wasn't a disappointment. She was her own person, and that person was stronger than she had ever imagined. I never thought I'd be the one to change things, Celery said, looking out at the city once more. I never thought I'd be the one to make a difference. Jared shook his head. You didn't just change things, Celery. You saved this planet. You saved all of us. Celery felt the weight of his words. She had come to Earth as a prisoner, a useless daughter of an alien lord. But now she was something more. She was a hero, a legend. As they stood there, the people of the city began to gather, emerging from their hiding places. They had witnessed the battle, the power Celery had unleashed. They had seen her stand up to her father and fight for her future. And now, they were looking to her for guidance. Celery took a deep breath, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. But for the first time, she didn't feel afraid. She felt ready. She was ready to lead, to build a new world where humans and aliens could live together in peace. The crowd began to cheer, calling her name, their voices filled with admiration and hope. It was a new beginning, not just for her, but for everyone. Celery had become a symbol of strength, of courage, and of the power to change the world. Jared stepped forward, standing beside her. You've done it, Celery. You've created a new future. Celery looked at him, her heart full. We've done it, together. As the cheers of the crowd echoed through the streets, Celery knew that this was just the beginning. The path ahead would be difficult, but she was no longer the useless daughter. She was the leader of a new era. And with Jared by her side, she knew they could accomplish anything. The years that followed Celery's victory were filled with change. The city, once broken and scarred, began to heal. People from all over the world came together, not just to rebuild what had been lost, but to create something new, something stronger. And in the heart of it all stood Celery, no longer the daughter of a powerful alien lord, but a leader in her own right. She had earned the trust of the people, and they had given her their loyalty in return. As time passed, Celery worked tirelessly to unite humans and aliens, working side by side to create a world where both could live in peace. It wasn't easy, and there were moments of doubt, but Celery never gave up. She remembered her father's words, how he had told her she was nothing, and used that as fuel to keep going. She wasn't nothing. She was everything. Jared was by her side every step of the way. The bond between them had only grown stronger as time passed. They were more than partners. They were family. Their friendship had become something deeper, built on trust and shared dreams. One evening, as the sun set over the city, Celery stood with Jared on a balcony overlooking the peaceful world they had worked to build. The city was alive with lights, and the streets were full of laughter and movement. The world had changed, and so had she. You've come a long way, Jared said, standing beside her, his voice filled with admiration. Celery smiled, her eyes softening as she looked out at the city. I never thought it would be like this. I thought I would always be my father's failure. But now I see that I'm more than that. You've proven it every day, Jared replied, his voice filled with pride. You've shown everyone that you're not defined by your past. You're defined by what you do with your future. Celery's smile grew, and she turned to look at him. And what about you? You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. You helped me become who I am today. Jared shook his head. I didn't do much. You did all the hard work. Celery laughed softly. Maybe. But I couldn't have done it without you. Their gazes met, And in that moment, the connection between them felt stronger than ever. They had been through so much together, and they had come out the other side stronger for it. As Silura looked out at the city once more, she knew there was still work to be done. There would always be challenges, always be obstacles. But now she was no longer afraid. She was a leader, a protector, and a symbol of strength for everyone. She had found her place in the world, and she had created a legacy that would last for generations to come. "I think we're just getting started," she said, her voice filled with hope. Jared smiled, his eyes reflecting the same hope. "I think you're right." And as the city continued to thrive, so did Silura. She was no longer the useless daughter. She was a legend. And her story was only beginning.